So I was walking that same part of the trail where I smelled the cigarette smoke.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I smell marijuana.
Ooh.
And a calmness comes over me. Thinking, oh, this motherfucker ain't gonna come murder me. He's probably just down by the river fishing and smoking a joint.
Yeah.
So I did
You don't
not.
have to worry about those potheads.
No,
man.
I didn't feel bad at all.
Especially if they're currently blazing, because they can't run.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to She's Loose. I'm Kristin.
And I'm Amy.
And on today's awesome episode, we are bringing you old-timey true crimey, where we're covering two cases that occurred before 1960, because old true crimes are freaking amazing. So many are still like cold cases and have so much mystery and scandal to them. It was just a different time, I think. Plus, we didn't have all that cool technology that we have today. Hello, luminol and DNA. So I love old crimes like this.
Yeah, it was a fun week researching and trying to pick which one, because there are some really interesting cases that happened.
I know, we're going to have to do it again sometime.
Yeah, I agree.
Old-timey true crimey part 2. But first, how's your week been?
Not too bad. Mainly just doing the research bit. It's been a lot of fun. It's football season. I'm a huge fan, so I've been watching football and just doing the mom thing, which is always something.
You sent me a picture today. Do you want to tell everybody what happened?
Okay, so I was cooking my children a very nutritious lunch of pizza rolls, and I cooked them in our Pyrex baking dish like I have a million freaking times before.
Yeah, it's like the glass dish that everybody uses to cook their like casseroles and shit with.
Yeah,
put in the oven.
I've used it like a million times. Like it's been my go-to thing.
Yeah.
And I pulled it out of the oven when it was done, and I set it down, and the freaking thing literally exploded. Glass went freaking flying everywhere. I jumped a mile in the air. I felt my heart fucking stop. And
like, where are the kids?
Thankfully, because usually my 3-year-old, my toddler, he's like right up, like, what are you doing? I'm hungry. Where's my pizza? And he wasn't there, but it was scary. And thankfully it didn't even hit me. So I don't know. It was not good times. And then I had to clean it. I had to wait for it to like cool off, because I was not about to like touch freaking hot ass glass.
No, that would be a bad thing.
But it was like, okay, well, so much for this. Let's DoorDash. So how was your morning and your week and everything since we last talked?
Really freaking uneventful, honestly. I've just been literally working from the moment I wake up, which is kind of technically sun up right now, because like sun up is like 8 o'clock almost. Mm-hmm. So sun up to way past sundown, work on the podcast. Also, it is Q4, baby. So I've been just working really hard on my business as well. And the podcast.
It's the time of the year to just like grind it out. Hustle. Which
you can make a lot of money in Q4.
And I'm slacking.
I feel ya.
But I need to amp it up, because 'tis the season for the shoppers.
Or have you watched anything or listened to anything like kind of cool this week you want to recommend?
Absolutely not a thing, to be honest. Not a lot of TV. I've watched some Peppa Pig and some PJ Masks. That's pretty much it, as well as like football.
Yeah, football.
I haven't even listened to any podcasts except for ours. So
yeah, I think I not really anything here either. But I did a show that I love came back on, and I've been streaming it, and it's on PBS, and it's called The Durrells. And I don't know if you ever heard of it.
No, I haven't.
So I love myself some period dramas and anything. And it's set in the 1930s, and it's got, I think her name is Keely Hawes, and I might be saying that wrong. She's this British actress, and she was in like the remake of Upstairs, Downstairs, and a ton of other just really great shows. And it's a comedy about this family that moves to the island of Corfu in the 1930s. And it's really funny, and I love it. And then this weekend, I took myself out to the movies because no one else will. And I saw the Judy movie. the Judy Garland biography.
Oh, how was that?
It was really good. So Renee Zellweger stars in this movie, and she does an amazing job. And of course, like at the end, I'm like, oh, starting to cry because it's just, her life was really, really sad. What happened to her with her, just the way she was treated as a child. Her mom got her addicted on uppers and downers and all kinds of shit.
See, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, like she had she had it really bad. And that's kind of the reason why she continued to be an addict throughout her adult life and struggle with addiction. And it was just, it really tugged at your heartstrings. And then my final recommendation is Schitt's Creek. Have you watched it?
I have. It's been a while. I think I've watched the majority of the first season, but I need to start watching it because everybody's fucking talking about it, like the people we know.
Oh, I know Aaron and Matt love it.
Yeah, and Amanda and yeah, and it's just like, okay, I need to watch it again because I do remember it was funny.
It was super funny. And the new season just got released on Netflix.
Oh, maybe that's why everybody's talking about it.
Probably. And of course you can binge it in like a day or 2 days. And David is my spirit animal. I don't know if you remember which one David is, but he's my total spirit animal. I love every moment he's on screen. He's amazing.
And that's a perfect episode show to have just going on in the background. Like there are some shows that you can't just have on when you're doing other things, but that's totally one you can.
Oh no, I hate missing like the jokes. I'm like, all right, you're not going to do work while the show is on because it's hilarious. Yeah, that one I like to pay attention to that one.
Have you ever watched The Office?
Of course. I haven't seen the whole series though.
Oh, it's amazing. It's my favorite. I've watched it like a million times.
Yeah. I'll have to like stream it again. It's been like years since I've watched it.
It's so good.
But real quick before we get started with the stories, if anybody has like a true crime, like personal true crime story or a suggestion on a topic that you'd like us to talk about, anything like that, we do have an email account because we are modern women. shesleuths@gmail.com. That's shesleuths@gmail.com. Feel free to email us, people.
Yeah, send us some love in the inbox.
Yes, please. Well, do you want to get started with my story?
Girl, let's get the party started.
All right, let's get the party started. Get some old-timey true crimey action. So, hey, Amy.
Hey, Kristin.
Do you know I was born out of an affair?
No, I did not, but I know now. How interesting. Okay,
yeah.
Go on.
No, that's it.
Oh, okay.
That's it.
I was about to get the popcorn. Okay.
Oh, cool. No, I'm like, my sister's gonna be listening like, Kristin. Very confusing as a child. My mother raised us and my dad was married and it was just weird. So, and then they get married like, 2008, I think my parents got married and his wife divorced him and he moved in here and then they got married. So really
that is interesting.
Yeah.
Weird.
But the reason I bring that up is because just like my life started, the story that I'm going to tell today begins with an affair.
Ooh.
And a surgery, apparently. So in December of 1921, so we're going to talk about an old-timey true crimey thing that happened in the 1920s, which I love that decade. And so December 1921, Eleanor Mills needed her kidney removed. No idea why, but her husband couldn't afford the surgery. Remember, this is 1921, people, and it was up to the husband to pay, right? Because the women didn't usually work. So the well-meaning Reverend Edward Hall, that was at the Reverend at the church that they attended, he stepped in and agreed to pay for the surgery. On September 14th, 1922, the Reverend told his wife that he was meeting up with Mrs. Mills to discuss one of the doctor's bills that were due. And at 2:30 a.m., the Reverend's wife grows increasingly concerned as her husband hadn't come home yet. So she wakes up her brother, Willie, I guess he was staying with him, and asks him if he'll go to the church with her to see if her husband was there. So her brother hurriedly gets dressed, and they rush off to the church. But when they arrive, no lights are on, and it's evident that the Reverend just wasn't there. So they decided to head over to the Millses' apartment, where they didn't find any lights on there either. They return home, and the very next afternoon, Mrs. Hall, the Reverend's wife, reports her husband's disappearance to the police. Dun, dun, dun.
Oh, snap.
So 2 days pass by. Okay. And on September 16th, a young couple, 23-year-old Raymond Schneider and his 15-year-old girlfriend, Pearl Balmer, were enjoying a romantic stroll out in the country, as many couples where you're involved with a minor enjoyed doing at the time. Because he was 23, she was 15. Very interesting. But forget that. The particular dirt road they were walking on.
Sorry.
How can you not comment? He's 23. What are you doing with a fucking 15-year-old? Okay.
Well, I mean, maybe like life was different. I don't know how different, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, whatever, dude. Yeah. So the particular dirt road they were walking on was known as a sort of like lover's lane and was located in New Brunswick, New Jersey. So they're walking along and they spot a couple underneath a crabapple tree. They're lying on their backs with a man dressed quite dapper in a gray suit and white tie. Clearly the sun must have been in his eyes because he was laying with his Panama hat like on his face. By his side was a woman who was wearing a blue polka dot dress. She was laying down beside him with her legs crossed, her head rested romantically on the man's outstretched arm, with her left hand resting on his knee, in a nice brown scarf covering her neck. Sounds like someone was having a nice romantic afternoon.
A little picnic in the park.
Mm-hmm. But the one problem with this scenario was that they were fucking dead.
What?
What? Yes.
Did not see that coming.
They were dead. So
they were dead.
The man and his underage girlfriend, and I'm just gonna keep saying that, quickly ran to the nearest house and asked the owners to call the police. So within minutes, the police arrived and were able to easily identify who these two people were because there was a business card propped up against the sole of the man's shoe.
Convenient.
Yeah, weird, right? And can you guess who this deceased couple was?
I am going to guess that it was the Reverend and the woman that needed the surgery.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, I know. I'm very good at keeping people guessing, clearly, by my storytelling.
Girl, you totally got me with the dead part. I did not see that coming.
So the Reverend Edward Hall, and no, that wasn't his wife next to him. It was that 34-year-old churchgoer, Mrs. Eleanor Mills, also married. The police were quickly able to identify the cause of death because as they removed the Reverend's hat, they saw it was covering a gunshot wound to his head. Oh, and that scarf around Mrs. Mills' neck wasn't just for decoration. It was covering a slashed throat. A throat slashed so violently you could see her spine.
Ooh.
Ooh, yeah, gnarly.
Ooh.
But her assailant didn't stop there, honey.
Oh.
He or she also shot Mrs. Mills 3 times. According to the New York Times, one of the bullets entered the woman's forehead about 2 inches above the nose, another plowed through the right cheek, and the third pierced the right temple. So clearly whoever did this was pissed off, and it seemed quite personal in nature. An autopsy,
I was about to say, I mean, they just shot that damn woman's face off.
Yep. So someone was pissed off really badly. And an autopsy revealed that the couple had likely been murdered on the night of September 14th, so 2 days before, the same day that Mrs. Mills went to meet with the Reverend to discuss payment of one of her doctor's bills.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And so also of note, around the bodies were torn pieces of paper that turned out to be love letters.
Ooh,
when they pieced them together, they were able to I'm imagining the police kind of just taping them together carefully. In a letter supposedly penned by Mrs. Mills, she says, "I have the greatest of all blessings, the deep, true, and eternal love of a noble man. My heart is his, my life is his. All that I have is his. I am his forever." Okay, why am I feeling jealous of a dead murdered couple having an affair in 1922?
All I'm thinking is, man, nowadays you can get those apps on your phone.
Yeah.
Where you send people messages and they're only available for 24 hours and then they disappear forever.
Ooh. That would have been the smarter way to go about.
Yeah, but I mean, technology wasn't.
Mm-hmm. Well, now guys just send dick pics. Let's be real.
Oh God, I'm glad Thank God I'm married and nobody's creeping up in my DMs, but no, thank you.
Be thankful. You're not.
I am so fucking thankful.
It's horrible. It is horrible out there, Amy. It is horrible.
I see the meme, so I have to assume that this is actually happening to you poor, single, beautiful women and men.
Is.
No.
It is. I have stories. I think I mentioned the story of did I tell you on the show the story of the guy who accused me of being a man? Because
Wait, what?
Did I tell you?
Accused you of being a man?
So, this guy kept pressuring me. So I met a guy on a dating site. We didn't meet in person yet, but he invited me. So usually like the first time you meet up on an online dating site, it's just like for a quick drink, right?
Coffee in a public place.
Yeah. Nothing, because you don't know, you can't really tell that well over text message and even phone call, which is weird. No phone calls, please. But yeah, it would be like seriously dating to like actually talk on the phone, like text me people. So he wanted to take me out to a show. Like he bought tickets to a show and he wanted to take me out. And I was feeling kind of weird about it. It was like some Broadway play when I was living in Pittsburgh. And he was pressuring me. It was like Friday night. I was tired and I didn't feel, he was pressuring me to like talk on the phone. And he said he wanted to talk to me on the phone to like screen me and make sure there wasn't any red flags. Basically what he said. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, that's a red flag for you to say that. And then when
a little bit, maybe he'd been catfished.
Probably, yeah, maybe just weird. And so,
or he's weird and creepy, which is probably more accurate.
Weird and creepy. So I was kind of putting him off about talking on the phone. I was trying to kind of like thinking of wanting to back out. And when I wouldn't talk to him on the phone after like a couple of requests, like he was being pushy and I didn't like that. And it made me
you can't, guys, don't be fucking pushy because it's not ever received well. Ever.
It's a huge turnoff. And
big time.
He wrote me something kind of in anger, and I said, this is a guy I never met before. I said, I really appreciate it. I'm not going to go out with you, and we're good. Like, no, thank you. And so he writes me back this angry message, and I forget
another
what I said.
Another
red flag. And I said, please delete my number. Please don't message me again. Is basically what I said. And then he writes back like, I think that you're actually a man and you're pretending to be a woman and you're catfishing me and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, you're just a shitty person.
You're no definitely not what I'm interested in.
No. And so
Move I just on. Good luck.
Yeah, I blocked him at that point, but it's fun out there. It's fun out there. So anyways, back to the couple. Her babykins, she called them babykins. The reverend replied with, I just want to crush you for 2 hours. I want to see you Friday night along our road where we can let out unrestrained and that universe of joy and happiness we call ours. So
wait, did you say crush? I want to crush you?
Yeah, I want to crush you for 2 hours. I think that was like 1920s.
Is that really crush? Okay.
Maybe. I think that was 1920s slang for I want to have sexy time.
Well, I mean, how it's not that far from today's let's smash, right?
Yeah, it would. Yeah, I think that's maybe where that smash came from. So I mean, this is a very like titillating story. I just used titillating on our podcast. Okay. And soon the public and media were also enthralled by these salacious murders. I mean, it's fascinating, right? A reverend and a choir singer having an affair, murdered, and then their bodies posed the way that they were. The media quickly picked up on this and wrote constantly about the case. And very soon the spot where the murders took place, it became a huge tourist attraction.
No shit. Wow.
Yeah. Okay. And according to one estimate, 1,000 cars a day came to the spot, and it even attracted people selling popcorn, peanuts, and drinks. There was even one person who sold samples of the dirt from around the crab apple tree for 25 cents a bag.
Wow.
And I found a calculator that said it would be $3.74 in today's economy. So I was just really curious about that.
That's funny because I actually had to do the same with my case.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, I had to know how much this was like in today's money.
So initially the wife of the reverend and her brothers, as well as Mr. Mills, were closely examined by police. Mm-hmm. Many said the marriage between the reverend and his wife was more of a marriage of convenience. So You see, Mrs. Hall wasn't very attractive, and I'm not the only one that thought that. I saw pictures too. She was also 7 years older than the Reverend and came from a very wealthy family. And to give you a little background on Mrs. Mills, she and her husband had been married since she was 15, and she was the mother of 2 teenagers. So, she could have been getting a little bored at that point. We aren't sure when the affair between Mrs. Mills and the Reverend began, but we know that by 1919, so like, I don't know, 3 years earlier, math is hard, the Reverend was calling on Mrs. Mills almost daily. Not suspicious at all, people. And Mr. Mills called the Reverend, so the husband called the Reverend one of his best friends.
Oh no.
Yeah, that's bad.
Oh.
I think
the ultimate betrayal right there.
Yeah.
But how can you not know that something's up?
Yeah, I'm wondering, because it sounds like the whole town knew.
Oh, God.
Really, the whole town seemed to have known. And so I think all this evidence is enough for the police to go, we need to examine at least the spouses more closely, which is what they should do anyways in a murder investigation like this.
Mm-hmm.
However, despite the police and public suspicions, still no arrest happened at that time. They just didn't have the evidence. Remember, luminol DNA, all that cool shit. During the initial police interviews, both Mr. Mills and Mrs. Hall, so the spouses, denied knowing anything about the affair. But like I said, the whole town seemed to have known, so it was hard to believe they didn't know. I mean,
yeah, you're just playing dumb at this point.
Yeah, I feel like they had to have known, or like maybe the husband.
You at least had your suspicions.
Maybe in the back of his mind, and then he didn't want to think about it or didn't want to. I mean, who knows? And it was rumored that maybe she had an affair before even the Reverend. So it might have been like a thing. He was just like, whatever. So her neighbor even said that they noticed that the pair met almost every day at Mrs. Mills' apartment while her husband was at work, which is pretty ballsy.
Big time. I was going to say, man, they don't even care.
But both spouses had alibis for the night of the murders. But oh wait, on October 9th, so that happened October 9th, we get a break in the case and an arrest is made. Yay. But it's not who you think it is. Nope, not the husband or the wife. It was a man named Clifford Hayes.
Ooh.
Remember that underage romancer, Paul Schneider?
Okay.
Well, apparently he said that on the night of the murders, Clifford had been with him and that they had followed his girlfriend and her father, who were walking together in the neighborhood where the bodies were found. So that Pearl, the underage girl, and I guess Clifford had dated the girl before him. So this girl got around a little bit. They had both suspected that the father of the girl, again, Pearl, the 15-year-old, that the father was guilty of incest. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, they suspected it. And Paul stated that he believed Clifford wanted to kill him and that he believed that Clifford killed Edward Hall and Eleanor Mills in a case of mistaken identity.
Wow, that's a lot to like keep up with and digest. And I mean, wow, talk about an unexpected layer.
It sounds a bit confusing to me because why on God's green earth would he pose the bodies the way that he did? Have all that anger and vengefulness and the killings. It just didn't fit, and the public didn't think it fit either. They were actually really pissed off. They didn't think he did it, and eventually Paul confessed it was a lie, so they let Clifford go.
Oh gosh.
Poor Clifford. So we have the spouses with their alibis, and this guy Clifford's now ruled out. So what happens next, right? Like, what happens? Well, finally a witness comes forward. It's a woman named Jane Gibson, a 50-year-old widow who lived on a nearby hog farm. She stated that her dogs alerted her around 9 p.m. the night of the murders. She looks outside and sees a person in her cornfield who she assumed was stealing her corn. So like any country gal would do, she hops on her trusty mule and off she went after the individual. Now, I live next to a cornfield, and even though I don't have a mule, I would never like go out into that fucking cornfield at night. Just a personal preference.
I've seen the movies.
I've seen the movies. Like, I'll take my dog out to pee, and dogs like to pee on things, so I have to at night take him over to the cornfield because it's not fenced in, and he's a runner, which is just so fun. So I take him out in a leash near the cornfield, and he's always alerted to something in the fucking cornfield, which is creepy as hell.
I'm good.
It takes his sweet ass time to lift up his damn leg. Like, you're cheering him on like a baby, like, come on, pee, you can do it. And I'm like freaked out, like, oh, something's gonna jump out of the fucking cornfield, or like right on the edge of the cornfield. And he just takes his time sniffing, and then he tries to jump into the cornfield, and it's just so fun. But this woman,
your dog is great.
He's cute. My little pit bull is so little cutie pie. He's got such personality. We'll talk about that sometime. He gets attitudes like a little teenager, and it's hilarious. But so this woman had no fear, jumps on her mule, goes after this person she sees, she thinks stealing her corn. This led her to an area near the crabapple tree, where she says she saw 4 people, 2 men and a woman, standing near the tree, where she says she witnessed at least one of the people being shot, and then another one of the women running away, but then being dragged back towards the tree. Mrs. Gibson then says she ran away in fear, but returned around 1 a.m. to try and find a shoe that she lost, or a moccasin that she lost. She says she witnessed a woman matching Mrs. Hall's description, kneeling over a man's corpse and crying. Because she lived on a hog farm, by the way, the media nicknamed her Pig Woman, which, if I'm ever in the media, God help me, do not name me Pig Woman. When we be like Gummy Woman or something.
Yeah, anything but Pig Woman.
Gummy
a little
woman,
insulting.
Taco Bell Woman. I don't know. So at this point, years go by. Okay. And here we are 4 years later. So we're picking up 4 years later. And for some reason, the media takes a renewed interest in the case. The New York Daily Mirror publishes new evidence. You see, this new evidence lied with the Halls' housekeeper, the reverend, and his wife, their housekeeper, Louise Geist. Well, really through her unhappy husband, Arthur Real, whom she married in 1925, so after the murders. Apparently, Louise disclosed to her new husband, she told Mrs. Hall that the Reverend had plans to run off with Mrs. Mills, at which point their chauffeur drove Mrs. Hall and her brother, Willie Stevens, out to the country to the spot the two were murdered at.
No shit.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, snap.
She was also apparently paid $5,000 in hush money, which I didn't even Google how much that would be in today's money, but that sounds like quite a bit.
Oh, that's a lot.
I will take that shit.
That is like probably over $100,000 in today's money.
This is something that Louise, the maid, and the chauffeur both adamantly denied. So it was her husband claiming, this is what she told him. Mm-hmm. But the newspapers didn't give a shit. They ran with the story anyways. Why wouldn't they? Because of the renewed public interest, though, the governor of New Jersey asked for the case to be reopened, which led to Mrs. Hall and her 2 brothers, along with a cousin. I don't really understand how the cousin was suspected to be involved, but they were all arrested and charged with murder. Her brothers' names, just to let you know, was Henry Stevens and William, that was Willie Stevens, and the cousin Henry de la Bruyere Carpenter, some shit like that. Okay. Names are not my forte.
Mine either. You're good.
Oh, by the way, you know how those murders seemed very personal in nature?
Oh, yeah.
The staging, the position of the bodies, the frickin' torn love letters. Well, during this time period, they also ordered another autopsy of Mrs. Mills and discovered that the murderer had also cut out her tongue and larynx.
Wait, what?
Mm-hmm. Okay. I don't know how they fucking missed that.
Right?
They didn't open her mouth. I have no idea. But if that's not personal, Amy, I don't know what is.
That's not just like a random, like, fuck you, boom, you're dead. Yeah.
And if you had profiled and then like accidentally killed somebody by mistake, like you're not going to like stand over them or whatever and shoot them 2 more times.
Yeah, you're going to realize, okay, this is not mistaken identity because now I can clearly see this isn't the person. So I'm going to leave your tongue in place.
This is somebody they knew with an axe to grind. But while this new evidence was great, apparently the state had lost a shit ton of other evidence, including the autopsy reports. And remember, we didn't have computers back then. And the grand jury testimony, because they had a grand jury convene, I think back in 1922 or 1923, for the wife of the Reverend and her 2 brothers. And they declined to bring any charges against them at that point. So that was all lost. How? Wow. I don't know. So the tabloids dubbed it the trial of the century. And this was before the Lindbergh baby trial. So it was pretty damn big at the time. That trial would happen later. It kind of reminds me of like the OJ trial. Like there was a lot of
it was just
spectacles.
It was huge.
Yes, it was very big.
Everybody talked about it. Everybody was invested in it. Like, yeah.
Everybody was showing up. Even some famous celebrities were in attendance for the trial. People, I have no idea who they were. I didn't write their names down because I didn't recognize them. They're 1920 celebrities. So the trial began November 3rd, 1926 in Somerville, New Jersey, and it lasted about 30 days. And as we said, it was freaking famous. Everybody was glued to the newspaper. I was going to say TV, but newspaper and whatever else at the time. And that woman, Jane Gibson, aka Pig Woman, she was the star witness in the case. Remember, we lost a bunch of evidence, and she was kind of like the big witness. Yeah. And the day of her testimony, she arrives to court on a stretcher and then was laid on a hospital bed, which faced the jury box. Because apparently she was suffering from cancer and she was terminally ill at that point. And looking at pictures of that scene, it looked very dramatic. And so much rested on this woman's shoulders, but there were issues with her testimony and her credibility, her statements made to the police. For example, while under cross-examination, it was revealed that she wasn't able to identify any suspects when police first presented them to her. And her story changed later to identify the defendants. And at one point, and there are two different stories of this, but I'll read you the most kind of interesting version was at one point, her own mother stood up from the audience and yelled, "She's a liar, she's a liar, she's a liar." While her daughter...
Oh, that's not helpful.
Yeah. If that doesn't like damage your freaking credibility, I don't know what does.
Well, to at least make the jurors think twice.
Yeah. And kind of the other version of this, what that was, that her mother was in the audience, but mumbling, "She's a liar, she's a liar, she's a liar," kind of under her breath while the daughter was testifying. But I like this version better. How about you?
Me too.
Sounds good.
It's a lot more, got a lot more beef to it.
We're more dramatized. Yeah.
A little bit more.
Love it.
I mean, come on. I'm not going to lie. I like the dramas too. So, yeah. All the sensationalism. Let's go.
Let's do it. I eat that shit up. So the state's theory they presented at trial was that Mrs. Hall knew about the affair. After all, the whole damn town seemed to know, right? And wanted to catch her husband in the act. She apparently then, according to the state, asked her two brothers to go with her. Adding to the evidence against them, the prosecutor pointed out that the calling card left at Mrs. Hall's foot had her brother Willie's thumbprint on it. Additionally, it was found that Mrs. Hall had hired private investigators, remember she's rich, to bribe the witnesses set to testify in the trial, not to testify against her. Others also testified that they had been used as spies to keep Mrs. Hall up to date on what her husband had been doing with Mrs. Mills. And this included a Sunday school teacher at the church, by the way.
Oh, shit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she had no limits.
Those church ladies, I'll tell you what.
They notice everything.
They notice it all. They see everything and they chat about it.
But those are like
they do it super nice though. They'll be like, "You need to pray for the neighbor such and such because I saw her do such and such and talk about this. So, pray for them."
Heart.
God bless
her heart. It's even better like when they're your neighbors because my neighbor in Pittsburgh was a woman. She was in her 50s and she was amazing. We actually became really good friends, but she wasn't a church lady, but she knew everything that was going on in that damn neighborhood. Like nothing could happen without her knowing. And it was great to get the gossip. But she was also like the neighborhood watch. Like,
see, I'm not going to lie. Like, I don't want to be part of the drama, but I do want to hear all about it.
I want to listen. Hell yeah. Tell me all the drama. Just don't involve me directly.
Exactly. That's
the life I live. So a hearse driver also testified that on the day of the referend's funeral, although the widow wore a heavy veil, he saw her face and noticed that there were long, fresh-looking scratches on her left cheek. Ooh. However, despite this evidence, Mrs. Hall and her two brothers were acquitted. And to this day, we have no justice in this case. And I'm assuming the cousin was as well. I didn't include him because whatever. We don't really know much about him.
Well, let's be real. I mean, if she's as wealthy as you were claiming, come on, like she couldn't pay off the judge and the jury and...
I'm sure all kinds of other shady shit we don't even know about.
See, I told you, I like the dramas, all the sensationalism.
I love it. And that's what I love about a good 1920s murder mystery. I personally do think the wife and her brothers did it. I mean, there's evidence there. pretty damn sure she hired private detectives to follow her husband. Like, she knew about the affair. However, I will note there were other theories put forth, including that the murders were done by the Ku Klux Klan, which had been growing in strength at the time in New Jersey and had negative views on marital infidelity. Another theory was
murder. They're so moral. Golly.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that probably didn't happen. Another theory was murder-suicide, but definitely wasn't that because the bodies were positioned in a certain way and the murder weapon was not at the scene, by the way.
Now, were they murdered at that tree, though? Like, was that where they were killed or were they brought there? Do you know?
Yes. So because there was actually analysis of the blood in the soil, and that indicated that the two definitely died in the spot where the bodies were found. But then years and years later, we get a deathbed confession, people.
No shit.
In 1970. So a long time later, a man named Julius Boliog, butchered that one. He was a former gas station owner who was dying and stated that he delivered $6,000 for Mrs. Hall to two local unsavory characters the day after the murders. Furthermore, Julius was friends with her brother Willie, who he said confided in him that he didn't like his brother-in-law, who, by the way, that the reverend, his brother-in-law, controlled his inheritance through a family trust fund and complained that he wasn't getting the amount of money he wanted in his weekly allowance. He also confided in Julius that his sister knew about the affair all along. Boom.
Tons of motives, motives for fucking days.
I'm pretty sure they did it. So
pretty sure. And even if they hired the hit, man.
Right. Wow. It might not have been them that did it.
But they still did it.
They still did it. Yeah.
You can't hire people to do it for you and you get off scotch-free.
And that pig woman was full of shit. I don't think she got on her trusty mule in the middle of the night or whatever time that was and, went through a cornfield and followed that guy.
Yeah, but you know what? She wanted her 15 minutes of fame and she freaking got it, damn it.
She did on her deathbed.
She got it.
Being put on a stretcher out in the fucking court, being wheeled in. I mean, it looks like quite a scene. I'll have to show you pictures of it and put it on her.
I can just picture it in my head too, and the whole she's a liar.
Liar.
That's great.
Liar.
Somebody should make a movie.
I wonder if they have. I have to Google around and see.
It's got everything you could want in a.
And I think if it was a modern murder, they would have found evidence, luminol the shit out of, found clothing, found DNA evidence and whatever other cool stuff they do. And they would have probably found the people that did it, if not them directly, the wife and the brothers, those thugs. Because, it would be hard. It's someone that rich and wealthy for her to get her hands dirty. It sounds like she used money as a tool for a lot of things. So it would make sense. This guy's deathbed confession makes a lot of sense to me. Fits.
Yeah.
Well, that's my story. Yeah.
Very interesting.
It's my story. So you want to tell us about yours? And I'm excited.
I do.
I want to hear. I dish it out, girl.
Okay. So my case takes place in the early 1900s, which is really funny because a couple years ago, I've talked about it on the podcast before. I homeschool my kids.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple years ago, we were doing a history lesson. And my oldest son, he's like, Mom, you're from the 1900s. You must be really old, right? And I'm like, oh, shit.
It's a whole century.
I know. But in his mind, it's year 2000, whatever.
Yeah.
It's 1900s is how it's talked about. So
right.
Kind of funny.
So tell me about the early 1900s, Mom.
Yeah, really.
When you were churning butter and telegraphing messages to people.
No electricity. Definitely no internet. Okay, so here my story takes place early 1900s, 1914 to be exact. And there is this woman, Tillie Klimek. Have you ever heard of her?
I'm going to say no.
All right.
We'll see.
Okay, so there's this woman, Tillie Klimek. She's living in Chicago in an area that they called Little Poland, which was fitting since her parents moved from Poland to America when she was just a little baby. Unfortunately, I couldn't dig up much information about her upbringing in her childhood or whatever, which is too bad because this little baby would grow up to become a serial killer and a black widow.
Dun, dun, dun.
Now, if you've listened to this podcast, you know I geek out a bit about those details. I mean, I'm no John, or should I say Johnny Douglas. Johnny. But the early years in a serial killer's life can be pretty telling.
Yeah.
And as for telling, Tilly did tell. She would go on to do a whole lot of telling.
Oh, I'm so impressed with your like tease and not like messing that up.
I know.
Tilly telling. Tell me more about Tilly telling.
Well, she had her friends and neighbors convinced that she could predict the future and, more accurately, their deaths. She would have these.
Get away. Stay away from me.
It's really convenient if you're a serial killer, by the way.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So she would have these dreams about someone dying, and she would straight up tell people almost in like this boastful sort of way. And then, sure enough, they'd turn up dead. But let's be real, it really wasn't any sort of like psychic gift. This freaking woman was straight up scheduling that shit.
Oh, that's amazing.
Right? I'm sitting there, it's like, how interesting.
That's a new one.
Right? How cool would it have been? Well, okay, maybe not cool. Cool's not the right word. But how interesting would it have been if like we could have pulled up her Google Calendar history, but unfortunately, she died like 70 years short of that advancement in technology.
Yes.
So, anyway, so she's living in Chicago, and during this time, it was crime-ridden, just crime everywhere. There were always reports about murder. Murders by women were up by a crazy high percentage, like 400% or some shit. And then, of course, there's Al Capone and all the prostitution, bootlegging, and organized crime that followed him from Chi-Town to Chi-Town from New York. So murder, chaos, crime, it was just like a part of life in those parts, which probably helped make the murdery things easier for Tilly. So
yeah, to like get away with.
So Tilly married her first husband, John M., and I don't have the slightest clue on how to pronounce his last name, so we're just going to call him that. They were married in the year 1895, and about 20 years into their marriage, sometime in 1914, John went to bed healthy and woke up sick. He died soon after, coming down with a random illness. But there was nothing suspected. His death certificate labeled the cause of his death as like heart trouble. And Tilly cashed in $1,000 in life insurance money and savings. And like you, I did the whole calculator thing.
Yeah.
So like in today's money, that was like $25,000.
Not too bad. All right.
Yeah, not too bad for the recently widowed woman. Well, Tilly didn't stay single for long. Soon after, she got married to a man named Joseph Ruskowski, who was their neighbor. You know, nothing to see there, I guess, you know. Anyway.
It happens.
Yeah, just convenient neighbor, and right after her husband dies, but who am I to judge, you know? Okay. So it's about 3 months into their marriage when Tilly had the dream where she saw with her all-seeing eye the lifeless body of her new beloved. And sure enough, he would find himself sick and also died the same year as Tilly's first husband in 1914. She then cashed in a $2,000 life insurance policy and savings on him, which was like $51,000 in today's money.
Wow. I'll tell you what, like if I ever do get married and my husband wants to take out an insurance policy, I'm going to be so, like, I know it's standard, but I'm going to be like really suspicious and just like giving him the eye for like at least a month after I sign that document. Like, okay. And then let's make sure we keep the insurance policy within a reasonable range. I don't want you getting too much money.
If it makes you feel any better, financial motives for men are rarely the cause of them like killing their wife. So
it's more of the female thing.
Oh, totally. And I'm actually going to talk very briefly about that because, you know, I geek out on those facts.
Geek away.
So there's still no red flags. I mean, that's $76,000 in just a matter of months. 2 dead husbands, but no red flags. Anyway, shortly after her second husband's death, she got booed up once again. But this time it was just a boyfriend. And in 1914, this was a very interesting year for her, apparently. He rejected her marriage proposal and ended up breaking up with her or something. And hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Oh, no. And this woman totally defined that shit. It was reported that she had spent some good money for them to both go on a romantic getaway to somewhere in like Milwaukee or some shit.
Wait, after they broke up?
No. This is before. This is like, okay. Yeah, not quite yet. So she spent this money for them to go on this romantic getaway. And it was here that she was expecting him to propose, but he didn't. And and he did not accept her interest in the marriage. So she done did the thing and offed his ass too.
Oh, jeez.
Now,
rejection's hard. Rejection is hard. I understand that, but
it is. You know. It is. And poor Tilly. So, well, I mean, I can't really call her poor Tilly, to be honest. But yeah, many reports about Tilly described her as not being the most attractive person either. Sort of like the wife in your story. I guess she was a bit on the homely side. She was considered greasy looking, lumpy, and had a stocky figure. And these facts at the time that in its era would have a pretty big bearing on what would happen to her, but we'll get to that shortly.
That's so why I use powder on my face so I don't get called greasy.
Yeah, we've got all the different night serums and all kinds of stuff now, you know.
No, they had makeup, but like it didn't a lot of that old makeup like have arsenic and lead and weird just like bad.
Oh, funny you bring that up. Maybe so. Maybe okay. So. Maybe that's why she didn't use it on herself. Well, even in light of all of that, and I'm definitely not somebody that really banks on a person's look, like their physical appearance as to like what makes them attractive or not, but I'm just reporting on what was reported.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so even in light of that and all the freaking death surrounding her concerning the people she was in a relationship with, none of that stopped Frank K from marrying her.
Frank.
Come and again, on. I have no idea how
Frank.
Don't be a Frank. Don't. And this poor dude. Oh, let me tell you what. So they live together. They get married. They move in together. They're living in this apartment building that is known today as Old Lady Tillie Klimek's haunted house. And it's barely 6 months into this third marriage, Tilly dreams about his death too. It was reported that Tilly would go around telling neighbors that Frank wouldn't live long. And first thing in the morning, Tilly would greet Frank and be like, "It won't be long now," and just like kind of taunting him. She would say to neighbors in a cheerful, joking fashion that he had 2 inches to live. Like, what the fuck? I mean, I guess she was feeling pretty confident at this point. 2 husbands, a boyfriend, a couple paydays later, and absolutely nothing is suspected.
Right. She's like, I can get away with this shit.
Perhaps, Kristin, she thought of herself as an entrepreneur, much like we do.
Really?
Okay? I mean, we're not in the business of death and murder, right? Our side hustles are a little bit cleaner and they're also legal. So
yeah, but we talk about death and murder.
We do.
I hope it to be our main hustle someday. So we can kind of relate to her a little bit.
Yeah, but it's still cleaner.
Yeah, true.
And it's safe to say that neither of us are living in this crime-infested area where murder is as normal as going to Starbucks for a latte either. Not that I really go to Starbucks, but
me neither.
A lot of people do. So maybe she really was feeling pretty good about her choices at this point. And get this. So her poor third husband, Frank, don't be a Frank. Well, he is sick and probably feeling the worst he ever had, all laid up on his deathbed, enduring his wife, Tilly, laughing and being cruel about his fate. Here she was sitting next to him and knitting the lace of her mourning hat that she would wear to his scheduled funeral. So I guess, hats was a thing, and they would have these hats. They would wear these black hats with lace and everything as a widow. She had even picked out a coffin she found on discount. It was $30. Tilly asked their landlady if it would be okay to store the coffin in their apartment's basement because it wouldn't be long and she did not want to miss out on the bargain. Well, the landlady was like, oh hell no. Nope, nope, all the nopes. And she pretty much told her she absolutely could not store the coffin in the basement or she would put her ass out with it. Funny, it's a story the landlady actually lived to tell because unlike others who have crossed Tilly, they weren't as lucky. But perhaps Tilly was in a good mood and let it go for once instead of holding a petty grudge because, well, I mean, her husband's going to die soon and there's this payday behind that too. And sure enough, soon after, guess what? Frank dies. It was reported that during the funeral, she even reached into the $30 coffin, grabbed Frank's ear, and loudly said, "Ya devil, you won't get up anymore."
Jesus.
Like, oh my gosh. She even played cheerful music after his passing. Like, what? No red flags are flying yet? Nope. None.
Like, at least pretend, people. Just, like,
no
pretend to be
fucking
sad.
flags. Like, nobody's, it's like, okay. Which I'm sure there actually were flags, but the police certainly weren't. They didn't care.
I mean, regardless, if I murder somebody, I'm going to and it's somebody I have to go to the funeral for. I'm going to go to the fucking funeral and pretend to be like the distressed widow.
Well, I mean, in a way she kind of does. And we'll talk a little bit about that here in a minute. So this happened in 1921, and another $1,000 life insurance policy and savings is cashed out. So after Frank's death, literally right after Frank's death, she finds another man interested in her.
Lord
a man named Joseph Klimek.
Oh, Joseph.
In a book I read, Lady Killers, Deadly Women Throughout History by Tori Telfer, she writes a chapter on Tilly Klimek and how Joseph went about to meet her. Joseph was in attendance at Frank's funeral, but he was not there to pay his respects. Oh no, he was there because he wanted to scope out the single lady who was just put on the market.
That's a new dating tactic I haven't thought of.
Well, there you go.
Maybe when I'm a little older and the funerals start happening, to like people I know more frequently, I'll just go to the fucking funeral, pick up a new boyfriend.
There you go.
Not murder them or anything. Just, just sounds like better than the online dating scene, I'd say.
Perhaps. And I mean, he's vulnerable. So, he's in that weird state.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it could work.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess Joseph, his friends convinced him it was a good idea. And since he was an alcoholic without a whole lot going for him, he figured it was time to wife up, which just so happened to be something that Tilly was known for. So why the hell not? Chances are looking pretty good. So he tries flirting with her at the funeral, but she's not having any of it. She's too upset. I mean, she just buried her third freaking husband, for crying out loud. Can a lady mourn a moment? So he backs off for a little while, but after a couple of weeks of him continuing to show interest, they finally agree to marriage. He seems like he really thought that Tilly was something special. He loved her cooking, which is interesting, and her knitting skills, and having a home with her. Of course, this was completely one-sided because Joseph eventually finds himself sick too. But lucky for him, he had a brother who would not accept Tilly's offer to nurse Joseph back to health, as a wife ought to do. His brother insisted that he be checked out by a doctor. So that's what happened. Yeah. So that's what happened. Joseph told the doctor about his legs growing stiffer and cramping up, his breath smelling like garlic, intense stomach pain all the time, and tons of other symptoms, all of which led the doctor to suspect arsenic poisoning.
Ooh.
So they tested for it, and sure enough, it was that.
Yeah.
And I guess now a ton of red flags finally started flying, and Tilly Klimek was arrested for the murder attempt on her newest groom's life. It was even reported that she even threatened one of the arresting officers that he was the next person she wanted to cook a meal for.
Oh, God.
This woman, she don't even give a fuck, let me tell you.
She's still kind of not believing, like, whatever. What are they going to do? Let me find the next guy already.
Exactly. Well, during the investigation, the police receive a ton of tips and letters requesting that they look into the suspicious death of her late husband, Frank, and maybe even the ones that came before him. So the police agree to this, and they had all of her former husband's bodies exhumed and tested, and sure as hell, they all showed lethal doses of arsenic poisoning. And the soil around it was clean, so I guess that was an important part of that. It also came out during this time that many other relatives and neighbors had become ill, and some even died after being around Tilly. A couple of family members went to the police station and asked them to look into the deaths of their siblings, 4 of them, who all got sick and died after a meal Tilly prepared for them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I guess there was this falling out with the mother, and Tilly sought revenge in the most disturbing and terrible and disgusting way. She fucking poisoned their food. There were even neighbors who told detectives that they had issues with her as well. And after eating candy that Tilly made for them, they also became very, very ill. One time, because one of them had an argument with her, and the other for talking with her husband, Frank. And then there was another cousin who had died after going to Tilly and Frank's wedding. And the list just went on and on and on. So Tilly's poison of choice was a product called Rough on Rats. It was a type of rat poison that was composed of arsenic and coal. And in the 1880s, it was a very popular household name. You could buy it without issues pretty much anywhere, and it promised to get rid of mice, rats, beetles, roaches, bedbugs, ants, moles, and so on. Husbands weren't on the list.
Oh,
but that didn't stop Tilly.
It wasn't on the label. Like
it was not on the label. Now, in my research, I did find an article about the pesticide, and sadly, it was used in quite a few suicides as well as other homicides. Arsenic poisoning, or arsenic in general, it doesn't have a smell or a taste. So people that are exposed to it probably had no freaking clue.
Right.
It was suspected that Tilly poisoned around 20 people, and maybe more. And I'm thinking probably more.
Right. Those are just the people they know about. Like, who else?
Exactly.
They don't know about.
Now, here are some of the serial killer facts that I was going to talk to you about, and most to do with the female serial killers. So over 50% of the time, they're related to their victim, which has been the case for Tilly. She didn't target strangers, but people that she knew or lived near, which is different from male serial killers. And over 50% of the time, the motive is financial, which really seemed to ring true for Tilly as well. She took out all these life insurance policies on her husband. She was sure to cash them in as soon as that freaking casket was in the ground. Anyways, that was just a little bit that I found interesting in my research. But Tilly's current husband at the time of her arrest, Joseph Klimek, he ended up spending like over 3 months in the hospital, but he did survive and lived to tell the tale of his brush with death and the poison widow, Tilly Klimek. So that was her like serial killer name. As for Tilly, she was convicted and found guilty in the death of her third husband, Frank. I don't know why she wasn't tried for the other deaths that surrounded her, because there were like 20 mysterious illnesses and deaths among her neighbors and other relatives, plus the bodies of her other husbands that showed arsenic poisoning and not natural causes. But she was tried for Frank's murder and sentenced to life in prison. She did admit to preparing poisonous meals for others, but stated that Frank didn't die from her cooking, but his moonshine instead. So in 1923, she was sentenced to life behind bars, which was the harshest sentence to have been given out against a woman in Cook County at the time. And speaking of the time, times were very much different in the early 1900s than they are today. In fact, it was even hinted that if Tilly had been easier on the eyes and more attractive, she could have gotten away with Frank's murder completely, because it was pretty well known that most attractive women who killed their husbands would walk away free from the courts, free. Totally, like they could shoot them in the freaking head and be like, "Oh, I'm sorry," and totally be let off.
Well, you're on the hotness scale. You're like a 8, 9 on the hotness scale. Okay, yeah. You're not guilty. Bye-bye.
Girl, if you were attractive, wore clothes that made the men look twice, or show just enough ankle, maybe let out a tear or something just to show like how remorseful and vulnerable you were, you would have gotten out off of the conviction and maybe even asked out for dinner later. Not Klimek. And good thing too, because she was obviously guilty, not at all remorseful, probably enjoyed every bit of it. Let's say she's got a man wanting to marry her. She gets to plan a wedding. She's seasoning his food with rat poison night after night, day after day, waiting for the illness to grab him. Then she gets to plan some more, this time his funeral. She gets all this potential sympathy that could come from losing a husband, and then, of course, the payday to reward her efforts. Who knows how many other victims she would have poisoned had Joseph's brother not insisted on a doctor for him. But
how long would this have gone on?
This girl didn't even care. Like, it was literally months after one would die, another would die, which just unbelievable to me. But as all stories must come to an end, the poison widow, Tilly Klimek, eventually met her fate and died in prison in 1936 from a heart attack. Apparently she enjoyed prison, though. She got to knit and the food was good.
Free room and board.
Yep.
Nice.
2 hots and a cot. But that's my story.
All right. I love these old-time true crime stories.
Old-time true crime.
Well, I guess that wraps up our old-time true crime episode. Do you want to tell them what we're covering next week, Amy?
Cults. We are going to each pick a cult and share it with you next week.
Woo! Cults.
I love cults. They're crazy and creepy and really fucking weird.
But maybe someday we'll also do another old-timey true crime episode, because that was fun.
Yeah, I think so. There's so many to choose from, too. It's great.
But everybody who listens, and if you like us, do us a favor, recommend us to a friend. Just tell one friend about our podcast so we can spread the word. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and give us those beautiful, wonderful 5 stars on iTunes. Yes. But that's it for this week. We will be back next week with our cult episode. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye-bye.